Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well today. We are Wednesday, end of June already. Hard to believe. It's amazing how time flies, right? I'm Katie Griffin. I'm the Director of Business Development here at Spire System, and thank you all for joining us today. We have a nice little intimate group, so it's fantastic. We'll be able to just roll through our content and I appreciate everyone, again, joining us today. I will give it just a couple of seconds to let some people still roll in as I see the names coming in. For those of you who are familiar with this knowledge-based webinar series, you know that I'm about to ask you while we wait. Yes, Amanda, thank you. If you can see me and see my screen and hear me, please raise your hand. You can do so in your little go-to webinar box. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, David. Thank you, Frank. Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you. I'll go ahead and lower everyone's hand. Just before we get started, we've got some exciting stuff happening in the world of Spire. So again, thank you all for your loyalty. If you're not a Spire client yet and you are in the audience, we can't wait to welcome you as a Spire client. I'm going to get this show on the road, and today we are joined by Sheldon Waters of InfoTrack, who I'll go ahead and formally introduce in a second. We're going to be talking about consolidating multiple software environments and really creating an ecosystem. You might not be sure as to what that's all about, but we're going to get right into it. As I said, I'm Katie Griffin, Director of Business Development. Sheldon, it's so nice to have you. Nice to see you today.
Thanks
How
so
are
much.
you? How are you, Sheldon?
Thanks so much, Katie. Thanks for having me and putting this together, and doing really well. And thank you so much for everybody attending, and looking forward to explaining some of our madness.
Yeah, a mad professor, right? Sheldon, where in the world are you physically located today?
We are in Toronto, Canada,
Mm-hmm.
and which is where we are stationed, and we are working all over the globe with InfoTrack.
Nice,
So,
interesting, good. Well, I hope the summer is being kind to you in Toronto.
oh yeah, the summer in Toronto is always, hot, muggy, and this year rainy.
Good,
Good.
good. Okay, so just a few housekeeping items for everybody. We've already done a sound check, video check, so thank you so much for that. This is a go-to webinar. It's not a Zoom. Essentially, the difference is you can see us and my screen, but we cannot see you. I will also say that we have a bunch of events that we try to list as soon as possible, as soon as they're ready on our Spire events page. So please always make sure that you're checking that out. You could go ahead and add it as a favorite to your browser tab. That'll help keep you in the loop. Attendees who are in the audience today will get a certificate that's auto-generated as proof of attendance and continuing professional development points for you. We do not do Q&A during these sessions. These are live sessions where, again, it really is just thought driven, knowledge-based conversation about industry related topics. And so no Q&A. If you do have questions, please ask your Spire partner. Likely they are in the audience today or will have access to this after the session is over, and they'll be able to answer any questions you have or connect you with our friend Sheldon. Okay. So I'm just going to talk about the agenda very quickly, Sheldon. What are some of the items we're going to talk about today? So we're going to take a look at, environment versus ecosystem. What do those two things mean alone? And then, together, what does that look like? What are the tools used that make up the elements of the environment? What are the costs associated with some of these tools? And really, what is the difference between the environment and the ecosystem? We're going to look at transactional and non-transactional behaviors throughout the day in an organization. And it's important to, identify what is transactional, what is non-transactional, and how that lives throughout your day-to-day processes. We're going to take a look at some of what Spire's non-transactional activities are and whether those meet your requirements, or you need to look at something that enhances that experience to, again, be most efficient and productive throughout your workday. We're going to talk a little bit about doing an analysis, a multiple systems analysis. The point of this session today is if you're running several different applications or pieces of software, a multiple systems analysis is a great way to avoid being in an integration nightmare. Okay, so we're going to talk, Sheldon's going to share with us about what are some of the best practices and some of the things he's seen work over the years about doing that type of analysis. And in there, we'll talk about ROI and customization and the benefits and all of that. And then again, Sheldon will share with us how all of this works in an InfoTrack solution for Spire users, and some must knows that you should take away with you before the end of the day. Okay. So when we talk about, Sheldon, environment versus ecosystem, I mean, the main source of truth for our friends in the audience today are Spire. And I always wonder, in addition to Spire, what other softwares are being run, like other than Spire? So Sheldon, you and I wanted to ask the audience this question. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll here. And ladies and gentlemen, you should be able to see that. The question is, again, after Spire, beyond Spire, how many different applications are you running? Are you running 1 to 3, 3 to 5 integrations or apps? Think about maybe what you're doing on your phone or your tablet or outside, again, anything outside Spire that's relative to your work, or 5 or more, right? Sheldon, it's amazing how an ERP can be so powerful, right?
Mhm.
But then wouldn't you say that when we talk about a business's niche requirements, not often are companies going to find an out of the box solution for that, right?
Yeah, I would say, Katie, that 90% of the time, companies will get incredible functionality out of Spire to do most of what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always a collection of things that go on that
Mm-hmm.
don't really have an application home, or an application home is created using something like Excel or a little mini database or
Mm-hmm.
a piece of another software package where
Mm-hmm.
you're using a very small percentage of that software's package's
Mm-hmm.
capability.
Mm-hmm.
And we
Yeah.
end up with these multiple pieces of software that we're working with, understanding that Spire is kind of the Bible of our business,
Yeah.
from the accounting and your core order processing.
The operations. Yeah, we're going to talk about what some of those different, most commonly used applications outside of Spire are in a second. So we've gotten a good majority of our audience who's voted, and so I'm going to share those results. Everybody should be able to see that now. So about a little more than half of our audience, Sheldon, is using 3 to 5 additional integrated solutions or outside solutions from Spire itself.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty good average, I would say. Given what you've seen, Sheldon, would you say that's usually the case? Like almost half of the businesses out there, again, have some kind of unique thing that they need in their process, right?
Well, right there, you've got about 70% of people are using more than 3
Mm-hmm.
applications. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's very, very accurate, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what
Yeah.
InfoTrack. That's where ecosystem versus environment starts to come in.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that a bit more. So, outside of Spire, people are generally using Excel. Okay. I mean, we talk about this a lot, having so many spreadsheets, but even if
And
you
Word
have and Word documents or, any other Office application that we rely on,
little
right?
access databases is a
Little
big.
access databases, absolutely. Yeah, where, that custom program will help out in a way. And so whether it's, warehouse management, or we're talking about, shipping, or we're talking about, again, something custom like in Microsoft Access, or even VoIP is part of your environment. These are all the tools that make up your environment, CRM. huge for businesses, right? And what happens when I know when I talk to people who are shopping for software, Sheldon, that there's a different committee, if you will, or department that would lobby for a particular application outside of the ERP, right? So it
Right.
could be your IT company, it could be accounting, it could be purchasing, warehouse, production, all of these guys each have their own agenda in the massive well-oiled machine, right? And
Yeah.
so this will make my job better, right? Sometimes, and I think this is very true for the smaller to medium-sized businesses, that it's not always a person, right? Like it's actually, or rather several people, that it could be one person, I mean, right? And that's one person who's monitoring the e-commerce that's going on, right? Many hats, right? And so Sheldon, what would you say is a bit of a consequence or the danger when you have different departments lobbying for one particular application, or one person who's wearing several hats and thinks that they need just that one extra app? Like, what would you say is something that we see a lot as a pain from that?
Yes, generally what happens is that this will turn into what we call islands of software with islands of data. And when that happens, we end up with people who rightfully so are working on a self-serving component of their solution for a component of their life, but it doesn't take into account the rest of the life cycle of a transaction or a business process. So the problem we end up when we see this all the time is that, I have this department over here who's doing these things, and then we have to take we take those printouts and we go over here and we type them in over here, or we created this link, but it runs twice a day and it's never up to date and it doesn't work all the time. And it just becomes a very disjointed, non-connected, centralized environment where people are rightfully trying to get solutions for the things that they have to deal with. Our,
Yeah.
our shipping guy is dealing with stuff that our other production people don't care about, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So you
So
end up
that
with islands of software.
islands of software that just blinders focus, where this is what I need to get my job done, and the collective is amiss, if you
Yeah.
will, right? Like, how does that affect the entirety of the experience for the customer? Because that's what it's all about at the end of the day, is what is this customer's experience, how you produce, how fast you produce, how efficient you are, how fast you get paid, how fast the orders get replaced. Like, it all comes down to our customers, and we need them. But you said something very important, and you talked about the transactions that happen, right?
Yeah.
And so if we talk about transactions, right, we understand that with Spire being the source of truth, in this ecosystem with all these siloed applications, that they need to coexist, right? And that when we talk about the story of an order being placed, we talk about different types of transactions. Okay, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but walk me through like the life of an order. Maybe the order comes in from a prospect in your CRM. That's got to make its way into Spire. Then Sheldon, we've got to pick something from the warehouse, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
And then, a label has to get generated, or that Microsoft Access program is now in effect, because it's taking it to a different phase, if it's a production thing, right? You've seen
Right.
that a lot. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then what happens? That information needs to make its way back into Spire somehow,
Or
right?
some of it does.
Or some of it does, right?
Yeah.
Depending on what people's processes are. And then maybe it goes out to a custom application because it needs a second coat of paint or something like that, right? So, and again, this could be transactional, non-transactional. We'll talk about the difference. Like, there could be money being exchanged here, a debit and a credit, or not. A lot of this is non-transactional at this
Yeah.
point still, right?
Operational. Operational.
Operational. Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that, what ends up happening a lot of times is that if you look at the life cycle of an order, and if we take the life cycle from, depending on the type of business that it is, you could have a componentry around I have a suspect who I turn into a prospect, who I turn into a client because they placed an order. Or you could have an order that's coming in through one of your order collection vehicles, like your website or Amazon or whatever it
Or your
is,
phone even, right?
or your
People are
phone.
still calling in orders. Yeah.
Right, right. So at the end of the day, what ends up happening is if we look at the life cycle of that order, in a very basic form, the order is, pick, pack, and ship, and Spire has the great capabilities around pick, pack, and ship.
Yeah.
When the order leaves the basics of pick, pack, and ship and some of the extra nuances that Spire so generously provides, that's where you end up with, well, we have this Excel spreadsheet over here that we use in order to track where these are in this process, or I've got this Access database so I can do my costing and allocate it this way and that way.
Yeah.
And maybe I've been lucky enough to get some of that data to flow through back into our ultimate destination, which is something we call an invoice out of Spire at the end
Right.
of the day. So moving that data around, if it requires manual intervention and manual data entry, then you've got time, you've got error, you've got frustration, and
Yeah.
a whole host of
Yeah.
bother.
And these are common challenges when, again, we're dealing with these siloed applications, or even maybe there is some level of integration with some of these applications to Spire. But, you've got all these different elements that, exist in the life of an order, your source of truth being Spire. And so these are the elements of the environment. What I want to lean now towards is that ecosystem, right,
Right,
Sheldon? And this is what you and I had been talking about is, now that we understand the elements of the environment, okay, that make up the environment, the ecosystem is more about managing those non-transactional events that take place through that life of an order. So the transactional stuff is the invoice, is the payment, is the purchase order, is really
right,
where those debits and credits take place. And then the non-transactional is this process of one step to the next step to the next step.
yeah,
And in an ecosystem like you provide or you're an expert in, there's no need to go in and out like we saw with all those errors. There's no arrows, right? There's no need to go in and out of everything. So let's talk about that transactional and non-transactional events that take place. And I think the best way to kind of define this is to just kind of through examples, right? So, transactional, like I said before, invoices, orders, work orders, payments, debits and credits, and these typically have a finite lifespan. There's time, right? Like there's a time dimension there. Like, one cannot exist without the other, right? So the rule of debits and credits that everybody knows. And
yeah,
and it and its lifespan is short. It becomes historical at some point, right? We
right,
file it, we
right,
file it away, or Spire files it away, right? We all
yeah,
know the basics of accounting there. And it's kind of an all or nothing. Like I said, you can't have a debit without a credit, and vice versa, right? Um,
right.
Sheldon, talk to me more about the non-transactional. Like what are the
Sure.
non-transactional occurrences?
So I think I'd break this into two elements. The first element is things that have to happen and data that needs to flow. And then the second element is the accessibility of that data to our end user. So if we look at the first piece, if I have like I said a little bit earlier, if I've got a very straight order that's a pick, pack, and ship, then I've got everything that I need inside the Spire environment for the most part, and depending on the complexity of what we're doing. But most of the time, we work in situations where there are so many things that have to happen between the point in time that the order is taken and the time that the order is shipped and invoiced. And that could revolve around production, minor manufacturing, outsourced manufacturing, componentry outsourced manufacturing, managing stocking levels and, an overall production management process. And you could extend that into both I'm selling a widget versus I'm delivering a service. So if I'm a service organization that does, some kind of, HVAC is a big one for us, or testing, inspection type services, all of these things have
Right.
a great amount of
Detail.
detail with scheduling and dispatching and then recording and then billing and costing
Contracts
and
and all that stuff.
contracts and all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah.
So you end up with, oh, I have another software package of my service manager, and I do everything in there, and then I go and I have to duplicate a modicum of that information in Spire in
Right.
order to get an invoice. Maybe I've got some connectivity to Spire to make it easier, but at the end of the day, it becomes a very disjointed sort of system. And
Right.
in an ecosystem, what we do with InfoTrack is we claim to be an ecosystem. Our sort of claim to fame is being sort of the center of the universe of data and processes. And the reason that we say that, I know it's kind of funny, it's our arrogance. The reason that we say that is because we build solutions for our customers where they live in InfoTrack to get all of this information.
Okay.
The information from Spire and from their
Whatever else
and
other
whatever else,
applications they're running. Yeah.
right? And
So I think we like, and it's a lot of information, but I just want to go back to again, just kind of defining the non-transactional, right? So again, when we talk about the transactional, it has a time dimension, it has a lifespan, it can't exist without the other debits, credits. We all know what that is. The
right,
non-transactional, and you've given a lot of examples there, and I'm sure that there's somebody in the audience that's like, yes, that's me. That's exactly
right,
what I'm living,
right,
right?
right.
But I think some of the common things in non-transactional, just to help maybe outline some of the not so obvious non-transactional tools, right? A CRM will have list preferences, okay? A shipping will also have maybe price preferences, right? A Microsoft Access will have the ability to trigger something else that's based on contract details, right? And so all of these siloed different things tend to have similarities. Like they can do some of what some of the other stuff does. They can do a lot of what some of the other stuff does. Spire in and of itself, you can make favorited reports, you can group
Mhm.
customers, you can, do all of these things that are unique to your business. But the non-transactional stuff doesn't necessarily speak to one another, right? And that's
Yeah,
where the problem is, right? When we talk about integration, those transactional pieces of data, no problem. We tend to be able to see those throughout different applications with integration. But that non-transactional stuff may exist in each silo, but isn't really talking to each other, right? And I think that
absolutely.
that's one of the biggest points here. So whether it's all of these applications that somebody may be running or something similar to that, you know, building that force field around where everything can coexist in an ecosystem, both transactional and non-transactional are important.
Yeah,
Sheldon, I was doing a bit of research as one does before they give a webinar, okay? Because we don't know everything, but we know, a little bit about everything, right? And so I did do some research. I came across a publication called Business Wire. You can easily find that online, folks. Really great read, actually. And it was referencing a company called Clio that is a global leader in cloud and ecosystems. And this also kind of ties into the IT world a little bit as well. But they had conducted a survey amongst industries that deal with the supply chain, provide financial services, retail, e-commerce, wholesale, healthcare, and technology sectors, right? And I think that we probably have friends in the audience that belongs to one of those industries for sure. So
yep,
they surveyed businesses in those sectors that were generating $1 million or more a year. And in their survey, they asked, how many different SaaS solutions are you running? And that
mm,
also included antiquated solutions, right? So not just the service as a software, which we we generally associate with another app, another app, another app. Okay. The QuickBooks world sees this very often, another app, another app, another app. But it isn't just that. The reality of a dysfunctional, sorry to use that word, but a dysfunctional ecosystem can also be due to antiquated solutions, right? Like we've always used this label
Yeah.
maker, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay? Like,
Yeah.
or we've always used this printer, okay? And it's still a dot matrix printer for some reason, you know? And so antiquated solutions can also contribute to the overall loss and dysfunction of an ecosystem. So I thought that this was a very interesting statistic done by this company. Sheldon, you've seen this in these industries, probably other industries. You know, there's a wave of digital transformation that's happening, and I think that that's important to outline in this
Yeah.
conversation. A lack of temporary connectivity. Talk to me a little bit about what you've seen in terms of dysfunctional ecosystems and some of the consequences of that.
For sure. You know, we see on a regular basis that people are using multiple applications before, during, and after Spire.
Mm,
So what you end up with, and I actually have a really like a good real life situation is we met yesterday with a new customer who has 40 spreadsheets that they manage in order to be able to track their production before they can produce an invoice out of Spire.
mm,
And you know they're fighting with the currency of the data in those spreadsheets in order to be able to be accurate and to be able to make things work. And the spreadsheets are great and they do a fantastic job, but it doesn't work because it's not connected to Spire or it's minorly connected to Spire and there's no real data flow and they take manual work to keep going. This
mm-hmm.
is so easily automated and eliminates it, you know, as one element of what's happening. And then they've got shipping software that they are working with that they have to then go and work with independently. Yes, they were able to get a little bit of connectivity again into Spire, but not enough that they have to go in and manually do, you know, 60 or 70% of the work. So what happens is you end up with great solutions to do things that Spire doesn't do, shouldn't do, and probably never will do because it's can't be
It's an
everything to
ERP.
everybody. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's an
yeah.
ERP, and you know
Mm-hmm.
we all do what we do best. But the
Mm-hmm.
question is, how do we allow these applications to work as if they are one application?
Mm-hmm.
And
And we're
and
going to talk about that and how it works. Don't give away your secrets
okay,
just yet. We will
but
talk about that and how it
that's
works.
the difference between an ecosystem and an environment, right?
Right, right, right. And how it all works together.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That continuity, that flow, you know, of if ladies and gentlemen, if you had to think about how much time is associated to an employee or a team member going in and out of one software. So Spire is very well liked and loved for the fact that all of our modules are integrated into Spire and that you don't have to exit inventory to place and enter purchase orders in order to place a purchase order, that it is all connected that way. And it is a wonderful ERP package with a ton of integration. But like Sheldon said, like it's an ERP package. There are things that Spire will never do, right? And that's okay. That's it's part of understanding what your needs are and evaluating these multiple different applications that you have, which we will talk about that. So functioning ecosystem versus a bit of a dysfunctional ecosystem. I mean, we're using that word a lot. And after talking about this now for about a half an hour, I want to ask our friends in the audience another question. Okay. Do you currently have an ecosystem to manage your business needs? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll. So the question is, do you currently have an ecosystem? It's not, do you have a good one or a dysfunctional one? Is, do you have one? And your options are, no, I don't. I absolutely don't. No, but I need one. Okay, I
Mhm.
have all these, I don't have one, but I have these different individual autonomous applications, so I need one. Or yes, I do, but it's not a very good one. And after listening to you guys for about 30 minutes, I can see how it could be improved. Um, or yes, I do, and I absolutely love it. We are in great hands. Our ecosystem is functional. We love everything about our processes. Life is good. It's software with no problems. So it's a bit
I,
of an exaggeration.
Katie, I would add to this as well that, you think about the work that has to go on that is, quote, manual. So,
Yeah.
there's a lot of functionality that we do manually that is part of our ecosystem, but it's manual.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll even, I've been saying this a lot lately too. Well, we let only 52% of you have voted, by the way. So if you can, guys, go ahead and vote. Um, I had a mentor throughout my career. He still is a mentor of mine, and he used to say all the time, this is back when, lack of contemporary functionality existed, and data entry, keyboard, no mouse data entry was the big thing. Okay, like
Yeah.
when software was a bit younger than it is today. And we used to say things like the mouse is an excellent browsing tool, it's a terrible data entry tool. And I agree with that still today, but the definition of efficiency no longer is I can enter in an order super fast on my keyboard, I'm amazing at data entry. Contemporary efficiency means there's an automated process that plugs in that order for you. Okay. Now, is mouseless, cordless data entry still a good thing? Absolutely. There'll always be a human being making decisions, but this ecosystem needs to have maybe more automation, right, Sheldon? So, okay, I think, a good part of the audience has voted here. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and I'm going to share these results. And you can see that 39% of our audience does not have an ecosystem at all. And just under that at 33% are thinking, no, but I need one, you
Hmm.
know? And then about 22 have one, but not a good one.
Hmm.
Okay. And 6 people are absolutely content and super happy with the way that everything is. So
Which
thanks
is
for
great.
sharing that. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
And I think it also, I'm losing my voice here. I think it also goes with how complex your business process is. The
Hmm.
more complex it is, the more difficult it is to be able to build that ecosystem. So I think
Yeah.
that has a bit of an
and
impact on.
even and even envision how you go about, like, there's so many elements that go into what we do in a day. Where do I even start, right? And
Yeah,
so that kind of leads me to the next slide here, Sheldon, where we talk about multiple systems analysis. Okay,
yeah,
and so that's where to start, right, Sheldon? Like, you have to start by analyzing your situation. And the reality is that so many businesses are relying on too many integrations, too many applications that aren't working together, and they're suffering from a bit of integration nightmare. Okay,
yeah,
and that happens. So it's a living and breathing thing, this ecosystem, right? And so to start off, Sheldon, what would you recommend? Like, I see here up on the slide that an evaluation process is really
right.
where you should be starting, right?
Hmm.
Um, what apps need to talk to each other, or as you've put it, share data,
Yeah,
right? Um, Tell me a little bit about that. I think it requires thinking beyond what your role is, right? This is like what we were talking about before, how you have a particular committee lobbying for an app, right? When we
right.
talk about that ecosystem and what needs to talk to each other, we have to consider the other departments, correct?
Yeah, right, right. And what happens is, the stakeholders that are looking for a specific type of solution are going to be focused on that. But there has to be somebody who is focused on the big picture to be
Yeah,
able to say, and when I say somebody, it could be, the stakeholder themselves could also
yeah.
have this understanding depending on your organization. Or it could be someone like us who's saying, wait a minute, this is great. I understand what you want to do here, but you haven't thought about the impact on what's going to happen here. So the problem with all of this is that you end up building solutions, but those solutions are siloed and,
Right.
as we call islands. So you need to be able to look at the immediate sort of stakeholder needs, and then you need to look at the needs of the full infrastructure of the ecosystem. And ultimately, that means Spire, right?
Yeah.
How is this going to get into, but we do not want to have to retype this data more than once. Our mantra is never enter data more than once.
Yeah. Yeah. And evaluating the cost of these different applications is important as well, right? Because software is an investment. I definitely appreciate what that procurement process of an ERP, a new solution like Spire is like, and that businesses make a large investment both financially and time-wise when they're dealing with new software. And so, again, we've got all these, 3 to 5 or 5 or more applications outside of Spire. What is the cost of each of these? Are they SaaS solutions? Are they, did we buy the license outright and have it installed? And further, how much of these solutions are we actually using, Sheldon?
Well,
You know?
here's three elements: hard cost. So how much am I paying? Soft cost. How much time, effort, and productivity is involved in order to make it work? And then, lastly, the effectiveness of this. So what happens is I say, oh my God, I found this application and it does this thing for me. It does 75
One
other
thing.
things, but I
Yeah.
don't need. But
No,
I'm willing
it
to
does
pay
this
for
one
it to
thing.
get this
Yeah.
one thing. And then,
Yeah.
we get, this is what we call application clutter. So we end up with this collection of applications, or sort of an application in particular that is very key to us, that we don't use anything in it except for these 2 or 3 things. And those 2 or
Right.
3 things are 75 or 80% effective for us.
Right.
As opposed to, if I could get something that does what I want 100%, and I don't have to deal with all the noise of the application clutter, excuse me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also it's important that people ask the question, what can I already do in my ERP? What can I already do in Spire?
Yeah.
Software is a living and breathing thing. It's constantly evolving. I know, being in the role that I'm in, that our dev team is always working hard on all kinds of stuff. I don't always know until it's time for me to know. But when it is time for me to know, it's like, oh, wow, you guys have really been working on a lot of stuff. So software is constantly evolving. And I think, once upon a time, especially if you're dealing with an antiquated add-on, okay, like an old piece of software that does that one thing,
Yeah.
can it be done in your ERP, or do you have to, actually find something else? So again, consolidating, where can you consolidate, right?
Yes.
Whether it's because you're only using a fraction of the application, or because you can actually now do this function in Spire, or you are, again, consolidating these 2 apps through a custom solution, just those features through a custom solution like you were talking about, Sheldon. I
And
think, go
I
ahead.
was going to say, here's another very interesting element. We've done this actually a number of times where, I'll use a very simple example. Maybe it's a payables process.
Sure.
So obviously you're sitting there looking at accounts payable going, this just isn't working for me. Like, how do I get payables to work for me based on the weirdness that I have to deal with because of what I do and who I'm doing it with? I have this
Right.
weirdness that accounts payable doesn't really work for me. And then what we will do is we'll say, wait a minute, we can augment this weird piece using, for example, our InfoTrack software, and a component of general ledger becomes accounts payable. You would never think of that. So it's about looking at the ERP of Spire and being able to sort of twist it on its head in order to get where you have to go without having to reinvent the wheel. The last thing you want to do is reinvent the wheel. If I can get 70, 80%
Right.
of what I need using Spire, and
Yeah.
there's an easy way to bridge that extra 20, 30% through, InfoTrack adding on or something like that, we use Spire. Use Spire.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you saying that as a developer, because I think it's important to recognize the power of your source of truth, your backend, your ERP,
Oh
again,
yeah.
constantly
Oh yeah.
evolving and stuff like
Oh
that.
yeah.
So thank you. I think another part of the health check or systems analysis check, and we briefly touched about this before, the different, committees and roles and stuff like that. But, it's so important to involve the people that work within the organization within a particular app as well, right? Because they're really going to be able to tell you at a hands-on level,
Yeah.
how good the app is. That you can give them on a scale of 0 to 5, rate this app, 5 being the best, 0 being you absolutely hate it and dread that part of your job, right? How important is it in your job, right? Like how much do you use it on a day-to-day basis? Are you absolutely reliant on this tool, or are you able to do it in your head at this point? Like what is, how
Right.
much are you using it? How easy was it to adopt this tool into your day-to-day practice? Learning curve when it comes to software are huge things that we have to consider. And then suggestions like, your team members, again, are the hands-on, they're the boots on the ground, they're the ones in the warehouse picking and packing, they're the ones on the shop floor painting a third coat of this paint on this item.
Yeah.
They're the ones dealing with international vendors and lead time delays and all this kinds of stuff, right? At a high level, the decision maker just we see bits and stuff of what's going on. So involve your team, right, Sheldon?
For sure. And the other component of this is that because you're doing things the way you're doing them, and it sort of works and everything, and you do have this, these pain points of being disconnected or entering data more than once, etc. What we've learned is that when we start looking at things from the ecosystem perspective and eliminating the multiple points of data entry and automating and doing those things as we
Mhm.
do with InfoTrack, we rethink the business process. So it's also re-engineering the way things work, because I could never think of doing it that way before because I had no tool that would let me do that. So now
Mhm.
that I have a tool that will actually do this, I can now skim off 2 or 3
Yeah.
processes.
Yeah. And the reality is people, in their day-to-day jobs, so many of us are just getting through the minutia of the day, right?
Yeah,
Like getting the tasks done. We're very task oriented as a species, right? Get
yeah.
this done, get this done, get this
Task
done, get this
completion,
done.
task completion.
Task completion. That you can't see the forest for the trees, as the
Yeah,
expression goes, right? Like you're in the thick of it. And so thinking about process improvement is a challenge. Stepping away from it all and being asked by your boss to rate an app and not while you're using it, get away from it and think about it, right? We talk about needs, wants, and wishes when we're evaluating software or we're doing a systems analysis, right? What do I
yeah,
need out of this external application? Aside from Spire, what do I need in this external application? What do I want, to make my job easier, to make my job more fluid, to be more productive, to be the best that I can be in my role? What do I want? And
yeah,
then what is a wish? Like, oh, that would be nice, but I could
yeah,
live without it, but it would be
yeah,
nice,
yeah, exactly. And
So
you know what happens sometimes is sometimes you get we laugh at this because we get into situations where we go, okay, we get the need is good and we can handle that, and we're having trouble with the want, but the wish we can give you right away. Like it kind of gets really weird when that happens, and that
yeah,
does happen. But the other
yeah.
thing I was going to say is I wanted to bring up in this vein is there are things some businesses deal with that are intensely complicated. And one of the things that I can think of that's most prominent that we see a lot and we solve a lot is getting in the quotation process where you're dealing with either configurators. So you have an elaborate form of configuration. If I sell you this part, then I have to, also include this and this and this. And it's all very fluid. It all has to be like sort of, it's a manual process that can be automated to a great degree.
Mhm.
Or there's multiple option quotations. So
Mhm.
if I have a multiple option quotation and I give you 3 options and you pick option 3, how do I get that into Spire without having to
Mhm.
retype it? So
Mhm.
these are areas where you're using applications a lot of times outside of
Mhm.
Spire and
Yeah.
creating a further island of software and data.
It's very clear to me that you have spent a lot of time in the evaluation process of businesses that are running 5 or more, 3 to 5 outside applications from their ERP. And you took some time to, and we won't go through every single point here, but you did take some time to outline how it works. And so from the solution oriented method, you shared with us, and the folks in the audience can read this as to how Sheldon and his team approach the situation from the get-go. One of the big things, and you just talked about this as well, is being hands-on, being there to feel and see how things are working. I'm someone who, the same mentor shared with me that experiences, cannot be shared in a spreadsheet, right? Data is shared in a spreadsheet, but experiences happen through a series of events, right? And so to understand the warehouse workers experience, you can look at data on a spreadsheet of how many items they're needing to pick throughout the day and pack throughout the day. But you're not going to share his experience unless you go and spend that time with them, right? And see that wall coming, that challenge that he's going to face, right? But talk to me about, so let's get a little bit more technical. Talk to me about the developing of an ecosystem. Okay, now I'll try to follow you because I'm not overly techie.
So this is how we do it, and this is how our tool set of InfoTrack does this with Spire. If you look at the like I want to say between 50 to 60% of the work can usually be around defining and understanding the processes and even re-engineering them, and then creating the solution using Spire and its infrastructure, and InfoTrack and its infrastructure and connectivity. The other 40 to 50% of the time is building that solution. We firmly believe, and COVID was really difficult for us for this, is that we need to be in your office, sitting at a desk in your office working. We want to be part of what goes on so that we can experience what it is. And we pick up on things while we're there, and we go, well, wait a minute, I just heard that you're going to go do this and do that. Why are you doing that? What? Oh, well, we didn't know that that's what you guys did. We could easily do that in InfoTrack in 2 hours.
And Sheldon, I know this to be true, just so maybe our audience can identify with this in a way. If someone were to sit there and ask you, write down everything you do in a day.
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay, I'll walk through my day. I do this first. I do that first. I, check the email, take the phone call, follow up, work on this, work on that, whatever. But it's the ad hoc, unforeseen things that happen in our jobs, in every one of our jobs, right? Where we won't list that thing, but we have a process for that ad hoc thing, that unforeseen. We have a process for it, but we didn't think to write it down in the what do you do in a day, because it sometimes is unforeseen, or again, just out of the blue. So if you're with somebody, that experience, that's an example of the experience being shared. I came across this in recently training a new hire, right? Like that, it happens to all of us, right?
Yeah.
You prep training documents, you write out what your processes are, and then you're in a live situation and it's like, oh yeah, but when this happens,
yeah, 100%.
oh yeah, this happens, right? So I like that that's your approach, and this is something you've carried with you throughout your career, it sounds like, right?
Yeah, this is the only way we like to work. And what's really interesting about it is that we could sit down for hours and we could drag all the information and everything out of you. But then when we actually go and see it, we see stuff that you didn't think to tell us because it's not important to you. You take it for granted. You didn't even know that you're living, most of our customers, they start off living with problems that they don't even realize are problems. They have blind acceptance to the fact that I got to just enter this over here and I got to check it there and I got to make sure
I've
that
always done it this way. Yeah.
Well, what else would I do? Is there another way? I wouldn't even think there is another way.
So
and then we come in and we eliminate that.
Yeah. So Sheldon, your development team, again, just getting back to a bit of the more technical aspect of it, correct me if I'm wrong, your development team will work with clients to understand what is necessary, to understand what is in the day-to-day process. They're not just in the background writing code, they're actually living the experience. Okay. When it is time to write code, this does not interrupt Spire, right? Like we are not interrupting what is going on in Spire. Again, that difference between transactional and non-transactional. So the development that goes into an ecosystem solution is not hitting the financials in any kind of way. It's not dealing with the accounting or the bookkeeping part of things. It's the non-transactional process that your team is coding into that force field that we were drawing before, right? Like that's what they're creating,
Okay,
correct?
so yeah, so we do with regards to that componentry of integrating our product with Spire. We have something we call we have a component of our software we call our conduit, and the
Okay.
conduit is an application that we've written over many years. We have I think we are at well over 7,000 man hours to build our conduit environment, and it allows us to work with Spire to synchronize data between InfoTrack and Spire, or InfoTrack add-ons that we build, if it's a mobile app or a web app. It allows us to reference data out of Spire and bring it into our system on its own. And it allows us to actually process data. So we can pop invoices out of Spire with no human intervention. We can pop purchase orders.
And for those who are very married to some of their external applications, you can also make sure that it remains intact, but is now part of that ecosystem and communication. Okay,
Yes.
great. You
So,
shared
yeah.
some screenshots with us, and I think this will just kind of help the audience visualize a bit more. Unfortunately, this one's a little bit fuzzy, but I see that it's contract master detail, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm assuming that this is all the details that need to go into a contract before any accounting happens, correct?
Right. So what I wanted to do was illustrate a little bit of visually some of the stuff that we will do. So when we have, in this specific example, we have a customer who works very heavily with contracts. These contracts are very intricate and very detailed. All of the elements in the contract will drive cost, which will drive invoice, which drives recurring revenue. So we will, in InfoTrack, build a management system for these contracts. And in this case, it's a service organization. So all the service dispatch and work orders, scheduling, it's a full service solution where you've got all of the work that goes on and the management of the contract with the customer. And it then ends up with an invoice in Spire that is 100% accurate and connected to this to the infrastructure. And then we'll take that and we'll extend that type of functionality into mobile and web-based solutions. So we have a mobile application, which is basically the core InfoTrack and Spire information and documentation in a mobile app. We affectionately call it a Spire Mobile to a great degree, because we take tons of data from Spire, including invoices and receivables and things like that. We make them available in mobile, and then we build applications specific to a customer's needs for things like that. I was telling you before, Katie, we just built an elaborate, and I can't believe how amazing, rental management solution for one of our clients.
Interesting. Nice. We'll have to cover that in another session.
Yeah.
So whether it's mobile, so those screenshots earlier were showing the mobile facet, or you've got the web-based, more of a cloud kind of concept here. I think it's important to just kind of take a second to say that your ecosystem is not a sedentary thing. Okay. Like I want the audience to recognize that your ecosystem is not necessarily built on your server. Okay. It's the entire flow of everything and how everything lives in this space of your world of business. And so mobile applications and web-based applications definitely are there to be considered also. So overall, we're talking about creating an ecosystem, what goes into doing that. We talked a little bit about how Sheldon and his team are experts in this area and the considerations that they make when they're building. But there's also improving the ecosystem, right? Many of our audience members did share with us that they have one, but it could be better, right? They have an ecosystem, but it could be better. So when we talk about improving it versus creating it, you know, what are you doing that's paper based? Let's work on eliminating paper, right? I mean, the paper conversation has been going on, I think, since I started in the accounting software world, which was a while ago, believe it or
Yeah.
not.
Yep.
And so we've been talking about eliminating paper, yet, you know, I know accountants and bookkeepers who still staple, you know, the detailed payables to the original invoice. Why? Because it has to be stapled onto
And
there
then
and
they
then
file it in a
filed,
file
and then
folder.
it's filed somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's eliminate paper. Think about where paper exists and it actually doesn't need to exist. Human errors. This is a common thing everywhere. You know, we're only human, we make mistakes. So eliminating that, you know, those typos or those human errors that get made through automation. Reducing your costs. Again, look at those apps, right? Like, are you using all of them? Are you using a percentage of them? How much are they costing you over the course of a year? Spire has a really great new budgets and forecasts module, everyone. So if you haven't learned that yet or checked that out yet, you should, because that will help you in assessing what your costs are and where you might be able to reduce costs, okay? And plan for projects like building an ecosystem. Increasing accuracy in order logistics. So, you know, different times or different phases that order life goes through, right? The picking, the packing, the label making, the spreadsheet, you know, you want to increase the accuracy, avoid a customer from getting two left shoes, which I've talked about before. And those minutia like tasks, you know, we talked about if you have to run through your day on a piece of paper, what does that involve? And we're all going to think about the repetitive robotic tasks that we do, right? But there's other things that are not minutia like. And so reducing those repetitive type tasks helps employees thrive. It really does. Improved visibility. You have dashboards that kind of just show everything that's going on as well, right, Sheldon?
Yeah, a very big part of what we do, very
Mm-hmm.
big. And
Mm-hmm.
Katie, I was going to say, in sort of like summarizing this, because I know this can be, you know, what we do is really hard to explain it. It's sort of
Mm-hmm.
it's a complex thing to understand when you haven't sort of seen experienced it. But
Mm-hmm.
imagine that, you know, you're using, um, you know, something like DocuSign and Ship It or UPS online and FedEx online, and you're using
Mm-hmm.
a very sophisticated sort of quoting engine, and you have a central place for all of your customer information, and then you have Spire. Imagine all of those things being integrated in a way that you don't have to interact with those applications. That
Yeah.
DocuSign document just shows up through the environment, through
Yeah.
the intelligence of the integration, and the shipping cost is chosen based on the best carrier. It's added to the order. It's
It's
the work
done
order
for
there.
you. It's
It's all
done
done
for
for
you.
you.
Yeah.
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 No,
Do you
the less human interaction, and never enter data more than once. That's we
Can you
say
do
that.
the same thing for laundry? Can you create a solution for laundry where I don't
We
have to
should.
touch it?
I know.
Let's wrap up here. We've only got 2 minutes left. Sheldon, 5 tips if anyone in the audience is actually considering creating an ecosystem or improving their
Yeah.
ecosystem. Let's very quickly run through this. So we talked
Sure.
about, you know, your analysis, right? So define the pain points and bottlenecks. That's pretty self-explanatory. Where is your company suffering? Where is it
Where
taking more time than it should,
where
right?
are the multiple data entry points?
Where are the multiple data entry points? Absolutely. Well-defined company objectives, you know, wants, needs, wishes, right? Needs, wants, wishes, whichever order you want to do that. And overall, as a company, what are the goals that you're trying to reach? Is it higher revenue goals? Is it better order to delivery time? Is it more
Less
accurate,
errors.
right? Less errors? Is it more accurate costs, right? Because you know the numbers aren't making sense. Also, by department, what are areas of improvement in the department and your processes, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
I love this. Set a realistic and flexible budget. It's software. You're going to pay for it. Nothing is free.
Yeah.
But be realistic, right? Like ask yourself, what is the value of having an ecosystem to us, right? It's
And
not just about the software, it's about the value that this brings to you.
And I want to add that there are many situations we get into where a customer says to us, I need you to automate this. And we look at it and we say, okay, yep, got it. Yep, yep, yep. Okay,
Yeah.
how often do you do this? Well, we do this twice a month. We go, here's the cost to do it. Here's
Yeah.
what it is to do twice a month. We're not
Yeah.
doing it. It doesn't make
Yeah.
sense.
Doesn't make
So
sense. Yeah.
it's, and the other thing I wanted to very quickly say is you got to do these things one at a time,
Hmm.
nice, carefully implement them one at a time,
Hmm.
because the easiest way to eat the elephant is one bite at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a vegetarian. So, no. So, and ensure that the engineers of your ecosystem are hands-on. So we talked about that before. You have a
Yep,
philosophy of being hands-on, being there, again, experiences, not just data, right? And then
right.
be aware of and avoid vacuum development. And Sheldon, that's one more thing, one more thing, one more thing, one more thing, right? Like you just get
Yeah.
sucked into this
Well,
development and it
it's
never ends, right?
well, not only that, it's where you got somebody developing something from you remotely, and then they bring it to you and say, here it is, and you go, that's not really what I meant.
Yeah, just again, sucked into the whole process and not being clear on the
Yeah.
solution, right? Thank you so much, Sheldon, for your time with us today. It is a difficult topic to wrap your head around, but I think that our audience members are walking away with some helpful tips and understanding of what an ecosystem is, how healthy, if they have one, it might be, and in addition to, all working towards efficiency, productivity, process improvement, and having a very nice ecosystem to work in. Ladies and gentlemen, we do these once a month. Before I talk about next month's webinar, our Spire Integration Partner Trade Show is still open. It was a virtual trade show that took place on June 8th. It is still accessible until July 9th. So all of the sessions that took place are pre-recorded. They're in there. You can watch them on demand. Just go to spiresystems.com/events and you'll see the information there to be able to log into that. We are going to be joined next month by our friends at NetStock. So Wednesday, July 20th, 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. We're going to be talking about dealing with today's supply chain issues. My friend Russ Graff from NetStock will be joining me, and we're going to share with you ways that you can't solve supply chain issues, but ways that you can cope with it, ways that you can deal with it as a Spire customer. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for listening to us. Sheldon, you have a good rest of the day, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.